So, friends, previously, Donald Trump pardoned the boots of the insurrection. His supporters who attacked the Capitol, beat the hell out of police officers, and hunted for our elected officials, including Trump's own vice president. He pardoned the boots of the insurrection previously, and now Trump has pardoned the suits of the insurrection, the attorneys and others who tried to help him steal the 2020 election, including the unindicted co-conspirators who were in his, Donald Trump's, federal indictment for his alleged January 6 crimes. He pardoned the boots. Now he's pardoned the suits. Let's talk about that, because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, Donald Trump appears to be using the pardon power in an attempt to build a team of criminals, put together tomorrow's conspiracy, maybe to make sure he never has to leave power. Let's start with the new reporting. This from NBC News. Headline: Trump pardons Rudy Giuliani and others who were involved in efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The pardons may be largely symbolic, as none of the people listed were convicted of federal crimes, which the presidential pardon covers. Friends, I see it differently. I don't think these were merely symbolic pardons, but please put a pin in that. We'll circle back to it. The article begins, President Donald Trump has pardoned Rudy Giuliani and scores of others accused of involvement in the effort to overturn the 2020 presidential election, Trump's pardon attorney said late Sunday. The list of 77 people also includes other high-profile Trump allies, including attorneys Sidney Powell, John Eastman, and Kenneth Chesebro, and Trump's chief of staff in 2020, Mark Meadows. The pardon is written in broad language that exonerates all citizens accused of election interference. The pardons are largely symbolic, as none of the people listed were convicted of federal crimes, which the presidential pardon covers. Several of those pardoned had already had their charges dropped by state courts. Giuliani was disbarred in New York and in Washington, D.C., over his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Since returning to office, Trump has sought to undo the narrative, undo the truth, established by an 18-month investigation by the House January 6 committee that he, Trump, oversaw efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election, culminating in his supporters marching on the Capitol on the day Congress was to formalize Joe Biden's victory. In January of this year, Trump issued 1,500 pardons and commuted the sentences of 14 of his supporters who were connected with the January 6th attack on the Capitol, including members of the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers groups who were convicted of seditious conspiracy. Now, friends, I'm not going to read through all 77 names, all of the suits of the insurrection that Donald Trump just pardoned, but they included his unnamed, unindicted co-conspirators, his co-conspirators that were in his, Donald Trump's, federal criminal indictment for Trump's efforts to try to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. They included people like Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark, Kenneth Chesebro, Boris Epstein. And they included other Trump lawyers and associates and lackeys, Christina Bobb, Jenna Ellis, Mark Meadows, Mike Roman, 77 in all. Many of these lawyers have been disbarred or sanctioned, like Rudy Giuliani, like John Eastman, Jeffrey Clark, Kenneth Chesebro. Jenna, Ellis, and Kenneth Chesebro pleaded guilty to crimes in connection with the Georgia State RICO prosecution for what Trump and company did to try to steal the 2020 election in the state of Georgia. Now, as you heard in the reporting, presidential pardons don't apply to states. So there are still state proceedings moving through the system. And let's hope that the state law enforcement authorities, state prosecutors and district attorneys continue to prosecute those cases, because federal presidential pardons will not impact those state cases. But when I saw this reporting, I'm not a political expert or pundit. I never even tried to play one on TV. I'm a rule of law guy. My entire professional career, I was a prosecutor in court, trying to remain loyal to the facts, the rule of law, and the Constitution. And when I saw this reporting about these 77 additional pardons, I sat down with pen and paper, and fueled by rage, fueled by a love of American democracy and allegiance to the rule of law and the Constitution, and fueled by probably way too much caffeine, I wrote a short piece for my Substack page that, with your kind indulgence, I'd like to read. It's a very short piece, but it's an easier way for me to collect my thoughts and relate them to you. So here's what I wrote. Trump's pardons of his January 6th unindicted co-conspirators is a recruiting call to interfere in upcoming elections. So we just learned that Donald Trump pardoned a bunch of people, including his unindicted co-conspirators in the now defunct federal prosecution of Trump for attempting to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. Who are these unindicted co-conspirators? The people who allegedly helped Trump try to thwart the expressed will of the American voters in the 2020 presidential election? Here is what American Oversight wrote about the co-conspirators in that federal case. Quote, the Justice Department's indictment mentions 6 unnamed co-conspirators who allegedly assisted Trump in his criminal efforts to stay in power. Based on context and details provided in the indictment, 5 of them have been identified as Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Sidney Powell, Jeffrey Clark, and Kenneth Chesebro. The 6th co-conspirator is speculated by many to be Boris Epstein. And who did Donald Trump just pardon? Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Sidney Powell, Jeffrey Clark, Kenneth Chesebro, and Boris Epstein. The New York Times tells us that these pardons are merely symbolic, writing, quote, the pardons, which only apply to federal crimes, are primarily symbolic. None of those named on the list are currently facing federal charges, and the pardons cannot shield them from continuing state-level prosecutions. This misses the point entirely. These pardons serve as a recruiting call for people to interfere in the upcoming elections, both the midterms and the 2028 presidential race. What do these pardons signal? If you are alleged to have committed crimes designed to interfere in an American election, Trump will have your back with a presidential pardon. Trump might as well post a job announcement. Election interference co-conspirators wanted. Qualifications: must be willing to lie about election interference, must be willing to undermine the expressed will of the American voters, must be willing to destroy American democracy, and if push comes to shove, literally, must be willing to attack the United States Capitol in an effort to stop the certification of a presidential election. Benefits include a presidential pardon for any and all crimes committed in the execution of your conspiratorial responsibilities. Trump is not only weaponizing the Department of Justice, he is weaponizing the pardon power and using it as a kind of calling all insurrectionists recruiting tool. Let's hope that nobody applies for that job. I'll say it again, friends. Let's hope nobody applies for that job. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe. Please stay tuned. And I look forward to talking with you all again tomorrow.